The Informant is a 2009 movie starring Matt Damon, who plays the role of Mark Whitaker, who is a really high-ranking senior executive at Archer Daniels Midland, ADM. The movie was directed by Steven Soderbergh, and when Soderbergh optioned the picture originally, he envisioned it as a whistleblowing drama. At the same time that he optioned this script, Michael Mann bought the script for a movie called The Insider, and that was a whistleblowing drama about 60 Minutes and Big Tobacco. So Soderbergh didn't want to do another drama about whistleblowing that was going to come out about the same time, so he changed direction and made this into what's called a black comedy. Now, it's not really funny, but it's kind of bittersweet. Uh, we'll hear this movie directed in a really unusual way. There's a lot of inner monologues that are going on in the musings of Mark Whitaker's bipolar mind. You know, he'll tell a story about polar bears who'll cover their nose because that's the only thing that others could see that would be black, and they'd be able to hide in the snow if they could hide their nose. Well, how would the polar bear know that if they covered their nose, they'd be almost invisible? So it's really kind of a strange musings. We hear the music of Marvin Hamilton's kind of very comedic way. So it's a bittersweet black comedy. Although when you hear the word comedy, don't think there's like a lot of laughs in this. So Mark Whitaker was the highest-ranking U.S. business person to be a cooperating witness with the FBI. Now, I've been to the FBI headquarters in D.C., and they've got this public gallery. And in their white-collar crime exhibit, you can see the Time magazine picture of Mark Whitaker. You can see the actual tape recorder that he used on a daily basis. And really, the FBI considers Mark Whitaker kind of heroic, although we'll talk about some of the twists and turns in the movies. So Mark and his wife now live in northern Kentucky, and we invited him to campus several years ago. We invited both of them to campus to be what we call our Heroes of Professional Ethics lecturers. And they did a wonderful job. And based on that, every year Mark comes back to campus and gives a lecture to my executive MBA students about ethics and compliance programs, and it's really very well received. So Mark has got an interesting story, and it's a story really about hubris, greed, not insider trading, but whistleblowing and price fixing. So the big themes I'm looking at here are really whistleblowing and price fixing. So Mark was the fourth highest ranking person at ADM. He was a new PhD in biochemistry out of Cornell, had worked for another company, was basically headhunted by ADM, and was brought in at a huge salary, made the vice president of the lysine division, and really led a pretty nice lifestyle in Illinois, in a small town in Illinois that ADM, Archer Daniels Midland, was the big show in town. At the time, they were the 44th largest Fortune 500 company, and the son of the owner, the son was Mick Andreas. He didn't want the company to slip to 45th, and they do anything to try to make that happen. And that anything included price fixing, so getting all the competitors together in many of their different chemicals, and say, well, if we all get together and we agree to keep our prices high, then we'll make a ton of money. And the informal saying was that the competitor is our friend, the customer is the enemy, because the customer always tries to beat you down, try to beat down the prices. And if we all get together, and we do this by limiting production, if we have a set amount of production that you do and you do and you do, then we'll be able to drive the prices higher and make even more profit than if we competed against each other. So Mark was brought into this scheme about a year after being at ADM. And he thought, well, okay, I guess everybody's doing it, and the government doesn't know what they're talking about, and they don't understand how business works. And so he originally went along with it. Then he confessed that to his wife, Ginger. And Ginger exploded. Ginger was a deep Christian faith and said, well, that can't happen. What you're talking about is going to cause my grandmother to pay $50 more a year because of inflated prices, and everybody in the country is going to be doing that. And so you guys can live better. That's just really unfair. And basically, you're going to have to tell the FBI because if you don't, I will. And based on that, Mark reluctantly talked to the FBI. And what they did is he became a cooperating witness. For 3 years, every morning at 6 o'clock in the morning, he'd shave a different part of his body and he'd tape the tape recorder. This is a 1992 tape recorder to his body. He'd go into work and he would spy on his coworkers. Now, this was really quite unusual because even when the FBI does this, typically they'll have trained FBI agents as undercover agents. They're trained beforehand. They bring them out about every 6 months to debrief them and see how they're doing psychologically, and then they'll go back in for another 6 months stint. That never happened with Mark. And Mark had problems. He didn't know it at the time, but Mark was undiagnosed and unmedicated for bipolar disorder. So, as I said, Mark really liked living this kind of lifestyle, but he was cooperating with the FBI, and he thought, well, maybe if I cooperate with them and the FBI does a sting and all these people in front of me, the 3 or 4 people in front of me who are 25 or 30 years older than I am, if they're gone, the board's going to look at me and say, well, Whitaker was the guy with the white hat. He's the good guy. He should be the CEO of the company. And the FBI and his wife Ginger said, Mark, that's really not how it's going to happen. People don't typically like whistleblowers in that kind of situation. And so it dawned on him that he wouldn't be able to live that lifestyle that he liked. Live in that big house with an 8-car garage and a really nice car in each one of those garage slots. He couldn't be on his G4 plane that had a private pilot, and he could give 4 hours of notice, and that pilot would take him anywhere in the world. And he thought, well, gee, it's going to take me a while to get back on my feet. And I'm making about $3 million a year in 1994, which is a lot of money, in salary and stock options and bonuses. And it's going to take me a couple of years to get back on my feet, to get into a comparable position. So, you know what? They owe it to me. And what he did is he started embezzling from the company. And he embezzled somewhere between $9 and $11 million, but probably closer to 9. And the FBI and ADM found out about this during the investigation. And the FBI at ADM basically told the FBI this is what's happening. So the FBI went to Mark and said, Mark, we know you're under a lot of pressure. We know that you really gave us this case on a platter. We have a several $100 million antitrust case against ADM, against all these people who are price fixing in the lysine industry, and we appreciate that. And so we're going to make the deal of the century. It's a sweetheart deal. You plead guilty to fraud, to embezzlement, and you serve 6 months in prison, and you're done. You're out. You won't be working at ADM, but you won't be in prison. Well, Mark refused the deal. He fired his attorneys that negotiated that, hired a hack attorney, went to trial, and was sentenced to 10.5 years. Now, the way the federal sentencing system works is you do 85% of your prison sentence. So he did about 8.5 years. And the tragic or interesting or romantic thing is that Ginger Whitaker stood by her man, just like Tammy Wynette. And she traveled from place to place. When Mark was transferred from one prison to the other, she would go and move the family to be able to visit him every weekend. And as Mark tells it, if he did 8.5 years in prison, then Ginger probably did over 3, because she would visit every weekend. Now, one thing with Mark, it's kind of unusual when inmates are released from prison, he was able to get a job right away. Was able to get a job because of his alumni connections with the Cornell alumni that set him up with a biochemical company in California. And they were really quite understanding of his interest to share his story with the community. And so Mark every year does probably between 90 and 100 lectures around the country. Like I said, we're really happy that he talks to the executive MBAs at Xavier. But in a lecture on compliance and ethics issues, he'll talk about mental health issues. He'll even talk about Christian ministries and the importance of finding God in your life and what that meant to him and how that helped him get through his time in prison. It's an interesting movie. I hope you enjoy it, and I'm looking forward to your discussion board responses. The Informant, a 2009 movie with Matt Damon.